leave my phone on for just a moment because there's someone out in the world who's checking the broadcast for us. Oh, we just lost the pictures. Come back. All right. There we go. Well, aha, good. So the cabin door is now closed, and it's time to turn off all communication devices, except those small things you can leave on in airplane mode. There we go. The great distractor. So, dear friends, how wonderful of you to come. I've been looking forward to this night for 5 years. For a long time. And this is actually a conversation that Larry and I have been having for a long time. And so I would like to introduce Larry to you. To some of you, he needs no introduction. Some of you have known him for years or decades. And you're so fortunate, because that's the case for me too. I don't know when it was, and I can't remember the name of the program. Do you remember what it was?
No.
The TV program?
Oh, yeah, that was a long time ago. A really long time ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we were together on a TV. It was like it was town hall, and we were both stay-at-home dads. And so one of the things that we share is a profound commitment to being there for ourselves and our children. And Larry is the kind of friend one is very fortunate to get in a lifetime. He's been there for me through some very difficult circumstances, and he never faltered. And through divorces and moves and life crises and social work school, speaking of crises, and one of the things, and we've shared clients back and forth in our psychotherapy practices for 20-some years. When I would be seeing a couple, I would send an individual to Larry and vice versa, and he sent many people to me to learn meditation. And one of my experiences of this lovely man is that he's about the best listener on the planet. He listens with his entire heart, and he remembers, and that's the feedback I've received too from people that I've sent to him. It's like, you were right. He really, I don't give a neutral reference. I say, you know, he's really one of my best friends of my lifetime, and you watch, he'll listen, and if it's a couple that goes, each person will feel really held and seen. And that's because Larry is a very compassionate man. He's been through a lot in his life. He's had lots and lots and lots of professional training, licensed clinical social worker. And he's borne witness to the transformation in the lives of thousands?
Yeah, close.
Thousands of people over the years. He says he's not a meditator per se, but he is a fisherman. And so he's... I guess one other thing I want to say is that as well as his remarkable psychological understanding, his Western psychotherapy understanding, we've always been able to have conversations at the deepest level of my spiritual understanding. And I guess one other thing, he's the kind of friend who can, when one is completely out of one's mind, very gently say, gosh, I think there might be a slightly different way of looking at this. And it's helpful to have such a friend. So, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Dear friend.
Yes. So I was going to say the same thing about you. So,
Ditto.
yes, right. I think the phrase that comes to me when I think about you and our relationship is a cherished friend. And one of the things...
Take this that is not behaving well.
Okay. So one of the things that I think has been remarkable in our experience with one another is it really wasn't behaving well.
Can you give me the pack?
Oh, yeah. Is your remarkable persistence at going deeper in both your meditation and in finding places in you that need healing, and your willingness to put yourself in front of teachers to say, I need to learn. And I think that that's a lot of why this many people are here, is that as you have learned, you have also known how to teach. And you, I'm sure, have touched a lot of the people here in this room and many more. So I feel privileged to have shared the journey that we have been on for these last few decades. So, and I'm looking forward to a conversation tonight. It'll be just like we're sitting in a pub drinking beer, I'm sure. So the illusion of abstention has been put out there? Okay.
My purity is... Why is this doing this? Let me see if this will do it, if it's here. Thanks. Mm-hmm. So there we were, sitting in the Hillsdale pub the other night. And a family, a three-person family was over to our left. And the little boy fell over in his chair. And it was a bad fall. And he started to cry. And there was no panic in the parents. The dad got up and picked up the little boy and snuggled him a little bit and set up the chair. And then the little boy went, for mommy. And how old was he, 4?
Yeah, maybe 3 or 4.
3 or 4?
Yeah.
And then, so he handed the little boy to mommy, and then the little boy went and snuggled in with mommy. And we looked at each other and we said, well, that says it all. Mm-hmm. That's it right there. And so the way we're going to proceed tonight is that I'm going to do a little bit of a lead-in, in a way, a framing of things. And then Larry's going to talk about attachment, healthy attachment, and the development of self from a Western perspective. And then I'm going to speak a little bit more from the Buddhist side of things. And then we're going to go on from there, have some conversation, perhaps be open to something from you folks. And that sounds good? Mm-hmm. Hello to everybody on the internet. Nice of you to come too. Please take a moment to become aware of your body as it sits here. Notice how alive it is. Not some idea of how alive it is, but notice that it's warm and that it's tingling and that there's contact, pressure with the chair. Notice that it's hearing. There's the sense door hearing. If your eyes are open, notice that there's seeing, and if they're closed, notice that there's not seeing. And please notice how effortless awareness is. And now, there's something that's been happening for a few eye blinks, which is that this body's been breathing. Notice that it's breathing. It's been doing this remarkable breathing in and breathing out since the moment of what we call your birth. And it will continue to do this until what we call your death. And now, let's pay attention to something that we almost never attend to. How is it that you know that you're breathing? There's something that we call awareness. What is it? What is it that's aware? Where does awareness localize itself for you? Or where's the you that is aware? And my experience is that I can never find the you that is aware. There's just awareness. Now that's kind of weird, isn't it? Who's aware? So if you'd be so kind as to notice, if your eyes are closed, notice the intention to let them open. They don't open without intention. And then let them open and notice the miracle of seeing. Seeing. And who is it that's seeing? And I'd like to invite you to turn your gaze toward this image. Those who study such things say that something like 13.4 billion years ago, something happened. Something bizarre happened. Because out of nothing came our universe. What? How can that be? And around this comes theology and every tradition, every culture in the world has a story of how it came to be. And it's one of the questions that the Buddha said leads to madness. Question not worth pursuing. It happened. It's happenings. And so, something I always think of when I talk like this, if you're wearing any gold on your person, that gold was created in the explosion of a star, a supernova. That's where heavy metals come from. The explosion. So a star lived out its lifetime and blew up and created your ring. That again is pretty weird. So, let's see if I can make this work. We live on a tiny little spaceship. And on that spaceship, we live at the bottom of an ocean of air, 15 pounds per square inch of air. And it's a little specklet that is just the right distance from the sun that the water is liquid. And water is only liquid for 100 degrees Celsius, right? From 0 to 100. From minus 273 to 0, it's frozen. And above 100, it's vapor. So something rather strange is happening. And on this specklet, in the midst of this infinite vastness, sit we. Next time you have a cup of tea or coffee, or you're sitting in the bath, or you're watching a pond in the rain, drop one drop and it'll go ploink, and surface tension takes it and goes and fires a drop up, and it goes. And actually in high-speed photography it does it 6 or 8 times before it disappears. I like this this image as a metaphor for who we are. An eye blink or so ago, a sperm and an egg came together under optimal circumstances and began mitosis, and consciousness appeared. What? It's the weirdest thing. And then it made it through, it made it all the way to birth. And then it was born. And what is it? It was a baby. It was remarkably unformed. We're the most unformed, undeveloped, unfinished species on the planet. Right? It takes at least 2 decades before we can really survive on our own. And then sometimes it takes another 10 or 15 years. So, where does this drop come from? It comes out of the world. And so do we. This is a little quote from Alan Watts. This feeling of being lonely and very temporary visitors in the universe is in flat contradiction to everything known about humans and all other living organisms in the sciences. We do not come into this world, we come out of it as leaves come on a tree. As the ocean waves, the universe peoples. Every individual is an expression of the whole realm of nature, a unique action of the total universe. Right? We do not come into this world, we come out of it. We are the earth. Tell this story very briefly. Years ago I was teaching meditation at a conference at Menninger Foundation, mostly physicians, and this fellow was there whose passion has been bringing the grasslands back to life, buying land and bringing the grasslands. And he got up on the stage in his cowboy boots with 350 physicians, mostly, scientists, and he went on to tell us that human beings had never walked on the moon. And we got more and more and more tense. It's like, what? God, how did they get this? How did he get up there? And then he after quite a long time, he said, well, of course, a spaceship walked on the moon. Not a spaceship, a spacesuit walked on the moon. But the people inside were walking on the earth, in the earth, because we had to take the earth with them, because we can't survive apart from the earth, because we are the earth. Enter the divine, enter the Great Mother, enter Gaia, enter life, that we are life manifesting. And we manifest for a little while, and then we disappear. Now, every tradition in the world has created mythologies about where we come from and where we'll go. In the mythology of my childhood, which was Catholicism, it was that I came from I don't know where, but that if I were good, I would go up, and if I were bad, I'd go down, and if I wasn't good, I could go to purgatory, which got eliminated. And so every tradition has stories. Like Buddhism has the rebirth story, and there's such a strong longing in us. I want to persist. And because this little droplet goes through what Ram Dass called very beautifully extreme somebody training. And we have to become somebody. That's part of our subtitle for this year. We must become somebody before we can be nobody. And the thing about being a somebody is that we know that we exist. It's sometime around age 2, we start discovering, well, it's me, and I have a will, and I, me, my. The song of the self really begins. Though I guess it actually starts much earlier than that, at a nonverbal level. But anyway, we go through somebody training, and we forget. We forget that we are out of the earth. We forget that we belong completely. We forget that we are the universe, as Ram Dass put it. We are God in drag. And so, since we know that death is at the end of this, we don't want to think about that much. And so we have a level of fear, which is, actually it's terror, which is, I'm going to die. And so, let's stay really busy. Let's consume a lot. Let's achieve a lot. Let's build a gated community. Let's develop our national defenses and our borders and because I, me, mine can turn into a small group, a small tribe. So. As I make sense of what we call spiritual practice and spiritual realization, it has to do with remembering who and what we really are. And what we are is everything. And somehow or another, through the process of birth and then mammalian development and somebody training, we get a layer of cognitive distortions and perceptions and beliefs and ideas and conditioning that convinces us deeply that we're not that. So spiritual practice, as I make sense of it, has to do with using the self structure that's developed, that Larry's going to speak about, to develop that into a strong enough platform, a stable enough, relaxed enough platform, to actually begin to turn inward and to accept more and more and more of who one is. And in that process of accepting, we actually wind up accepting the whole catastrophe. So, I guess one more thing, which is, one hears some really silly things in the spiritual world. One is, the goal is to get rid of your ego. Well, if you'd like to be institutionalized and taken care of for the rest of your life, get rid of your ego. A wiser choice would be, I want to develop an ego which is so stable and comfortable and functional that I can actually use it to remember who I really am. So I think that's, right, the baton.
It can be metaphorical.
Yes.
So can you put the
Next.
other
Yep.
the next photo up
Yep,
there?
yep, yep.
So I'm interested in talking to you a bit tonight about the importance of attachment in this somebody training and the reason that it's important. It seems to me that attachment is pretty crucial in this expanding ego that allows us to take in more and more, because it's the basis of self-regulation. It is, I'm going to use a word, and we may use the word clinging a little later on tonight, but attachment is something that gives us a foundation to not be so clinging. And I don't mean needy necessarily, although that's a part of it, but it has to do with saying, I have to have things a certain way. If I don't have it a certain way, bad things are going to come up in me and I can't tolerate them. So I have to force an outcome. Self-regulation is something that helps us know how to soothe ourselves, and it is the beginning of the attachment process. So what is attachment? There was a Supreme Court justice several decades ago, I forget who said about pornography, I will know it when I see it. Well, I think looking at that photograph between the mom and the infant, there is connection there. There is eye contact. There is a look of absolute delight and concentration between those two. And if I stretch my perception a little bit, I would even suggest that there is adoration going on between that mother and that infant. Attachment, to me, is built on a couple of different qualities. One of them is connection. You show up and you're present. You have some sense of yourself and you have a knowing about the other person. The eye contact is pretty crucial, particularly early on. If an infant has eye contact with a parent, and I'm going to assume this is about mostly mothers, but doesn't have to be, and the mother turns away, the infant is going to start getting restless relatively soon. We are social beings and we're looking for connection. So there is also warmth that is a building block of attachment. You got to feel welcomed. You have to feel like I matter and this person wants me around. Respect is also another piece, and I think I would add in the negative, it is the absence, not entire absence, but is the absence of an abundance of criticism or shame. It is saying, I see that you have your needs, and I can know that they are perhaps separate from mine, and I want to behave in a way that honors your needs, that honors your way of being. That brings me to another piece of attachment, a building block, and that is empathy. How do I convey that I get who you are? In early infancy, it is about, I'm taking care of you. Do you need to be fed? I think I know what that cry means. I think that means that you need to be changed. Oh, no, that cry, that means you're frustrated, and I'm going to act accordingly. the last one that I think, and there are probably more, these are just some of the ones off the top of my head, but reliability and consistency of that kind of empathy and attention, that kind of connection, when you get to count on it, time after time after time, the mom or the dad goes away, the infant is perhaps agitated or perhaps quiet, and then the parent comes back. And the infant says, I'm connected again. My pack is here. And I'm not suggesting that this is happening at a conscious level. I'm saying that this is the kind of thing that's happening at a cellular level. Because in the first 2 years of life, the infant's brain is mostly dominated on the right side. That's where the limbic system is. That's where all the emotional kind of stuff is happening. And an infant needs, in order to develop fully, an infant needs a parent who is comfortable in his or her right side of the brain. And those communications really happen at a nonverbal level. The infant is taking in atmosphere, not just breathing, but atmosphere that's created in interactions, atmosphere that is going on around it. So tones of voice, the loudness of voices, the smells, the facial expressions, skin-to-skin contact, and muscle-to-muscle contact. You know, if you've got a parent who is freaking out about just having lost a job and where is the money coming from to pay the rent, and that parent is tense, holding that baby is going to feel the tension. So hopefully that's a temporary kind of state, but what happens if it is an extended state? What happens if the parent is stressed out all the time, that there is all kinds of drama going on all the time? Then the infant is going to begin sensing this is not a safe place here. And safety is probably one of the first things that a baby is going to be looking for, not intentionally, but in order to inhabit its own body, a child needs to feel safe. There needs to be enough caretaking that's going on that the needs can rise and fall without too much distress. So it's through all of these thousands of interactions. I can't imagine how many micro interactions in any given day of a parent looking at an infant, a parent responding to the cry of an infant, and how do they respond? What kind of tone are they taking to that infant who is in some kind of distress? All of those interactions in the first couple of years of life are having a huge impact. Little ones are like sponges. They're taking all this stuff in. And it's happening before they have language. The left side of the brain isn't developed, so that there's going to be no real way for the child to say, I remember this, because they don't have a way to conceive it. And so it's going to feel after a time, as the child grows up, that whatever the atmosphere was in their home when they were in the first couple of years, that's just me, you know? That's just who I am. And depending on how much distress that infant had to go through, that's just how I am is going to have a very different developing story. Yes?
I just remembered something I left out in my introduction of you.
Uh-huh.
That my insecure attachment has emerged any number of times in our friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And you have been there, and it's calmed me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that we talked about the role of the other and the loving friend and the community, and
Yes.
if we're such a hopeful story.
Mm-hmm.
That we can have this very challenged beginnings, and that we can actually heal each other.
Yes,
and you've been there for me in that way remarkably. So, thank you.
There is a lot to be said for having a parent who is calm. In Buddhist terms, a parent who can live in equanimity. Because with a calm parent, an infant gets the experience that problems can be solved. And there is a chance as the child gets older to begin to idealize this parent or these parents. You take care of me. You help me feel calmer myself. And as time goes on, that kind of calmness, that kind of sense of I am attended to, I am wanted, I am welcomed and respected, that gets internalized in a secure, attached environment. By comparison, I'd like to give you a couple of different styles of attachment that aren't so secure. One is called Avoidant Attachment. And let's take this picture here and change the story a little bit. You're not going to be able to tell this from this woman's face, but hopefully I can paint enough of a picture of a different story that you'll be able to get the impression of what I'm trying to convey here. Suppose this woman comes from the Midwest, maybe Scandinavian background, maybe Germanic background. Her parents were hard-working people, valued hard work. The sense was life is hard and you just got to keep on going at it. You don't have a luxury to sit down. You can't really pay attention to being tired because there are things to be taken care of.
Isn't that the way it is?
Yes. Well, for a lot of us, yes. This kind of mom or these kind of parents are going to communicate maybe what W.C. Fields is famous for saying, "Don't wait, kid, you bother me." Because there is stuff to be taken care of, and if you are needy, I don't have room for that. I don't have room for my own neediness because that's a vulnerability. If I were to sit down, I might not ever get up. And so this kind of parent is going to be really, really good at encouraging independence. That parent is going to be saying, go play. But really what the child is wanting is some sense of connection. Will you play with me? Not go play by yourself. I want to play with you. I want to see your face. I want to experience your delight in me. But this mother who I am hypothesizing about here is probably not going to be very warm. The face might be cold, the voice might be dismissive. And so the atmosphere that gets created is one of barrenness. It's one more like a desert. And the child, in response to this, is going to learn pretty quickly it's painful to need stuff because my needs go unrecognized and then I feel really alone. I am on my own. And again, if this is happening a lot in the first couple of years of life, there's no cognitive way to think about that for the infant. It is just an awful feeling. And so as these kids grow up into adults, they are going to be really good at making mountains into molehills. They are going to take something that is important and they're going to dismiss it over and over again because feeling something, saying, wait, I'm in distress here, there's no room for that. So the child is going to grow up not knowing what to do very much with intimacy because intimacy between this avoidant parent and this child is not allowed. It's a weakness. It's a vulnerability. you gotta learn how to do this on your own. I was reading a statistic the other day that 44% of Americans, if they were posed the question, would you pick up a 3-month-old infant in the middle of the night who was crying, said they would not, because it would spoil the child. That's a powerful belief in our culture. There's a fellow named George Lacan, I think is his name. He's a linguist from the University of Berkeley. He's written a book called Moral Politics, and his notion was that by paying attention to the language of liberals and conservatives, you could determine what their model of life was, how they thought about the world. And he came to the question that would delineate conservatives from liberals, and it had to do with would you pick up an infant in the middle of the night who was crying? And conservatives said, no, I wouldn't, because it would spoil this child. And the liberals were more likely to say, of course I would. So I have no idea whether that's playing out in politics these days, but there is. When I listen to talks about budget, and who's getting what kinds of services, I kind of think maybe that's going on here. So another style of attachment that is less than optimal is called an ambivalent or an anxious attachment. So let me tell you a different story about this mother. Maybe a couple of them. Think about this mom with this infant right now, and she's got 2 or 3 other children from 2 to 6 years old. Do you think she's going to have very much of the luxury of this kind of time to spend with this little one that she's staring so adoringly at? Probably not. What if she's a single mom and she's got to work, either part-time or full-time? She comes home and she's absolutely exhausted. Some of the time, when she's feeling good, she can pay attention to this little one. But maybe a lot of the time, she's trying to get the dishes done, she's trying to get food on the table, she's worried about getting the kids out the door and to go to school in the morning. And this baby is going to say to itself, in its feeling, I had you, but then you were gone. Where did you go? When are you coming back? That kind of attachment, that sometimes there, sometimes not there, is going to stir up an awful lot of agitation, a lot of distress, because there isn't the reliability that I mentioned earlier. Yes.
What's wrong with me that she won't pay attention to me?
Exactly. That's the belief that can get formed later on, because the experience is so agitating, it's so distressing, you have to assume it's got to be about me. And so lots of kids decide, well, lots of things to decide. One is, I have to fix my mom or my dad in order to get them to come back. I have to soothe them because they look so upset. If I could just soothe them, then maybe they will take care of me. Maybe they'll be my parent again. Other kids might think, well, pretty clearly, I need to do better. I need to be more perfect in some fashion or another. Then maybe I'll get the attention that I so crave. So instead of a desert, this kind of attachment is very much like a jungle. There are all kinds of entanglements because the child isn't going to be able to predict very well, when is my mom going to be preoccupied? You might not even know that she's necessarily preoccupied, but you just know, you experience that she is not tending to me. She's not looking at me. She might be giving me a bottle, but there's a dishwasher to be unloaded. She might be watching TV while she's feeding me instead of looking in my eyes and interacting with me. So that's an ambivalent kind of mom, one who is back and forth. There's another lesser form of this, and that is a mom who is anxious, a mom who's worried. The world is not a safe place for this mom. And she is paying really close attention to what's going on with this baby. So much so that she can be really intrusive. There is not very much respect for boundaries. One of the things that, I don't know if I mentioned it to you about the family in Hillsdale. One of the things that I appreciated about that mom was that she sensed that after her son had been comforted, he was ready to move. He wanted to go back to his chair. She let him go.
Yep.
That's an important piece. It's a difficult piece for parents to get, I think, because you can hold them close, but how do you know when to let them go? How do you know when to read that they want their autonomy back? And so that, if a mom is really anxious, that back and forth movement is going to get interrupted, or it's going to be more on the mom's schedule than it is going to be on the infant's schedule. The mom is going to be what's called a helicopter mom, and what gets communicated is, I am anxious, and then the baby picks up the anxiety, and that's where the jungle starts to happen. Things get really entwined, and it's very difficult to figure out what belongs to them, the adults, and what belongs to me. So I guess I want to say some things about the first couple of years of life here, developmental stages.
Before we go there,
Yes.
When the mother of my children was pregnant with our first child, I went to my therapist, and I was very worried that I wasn't going to be an adequate parent. Mm-hmm. And he said, don't worry, Robert. One way or another, you're going to screw up your kids. And it's true.
Yes.
So for those of you that are parents in the room, or this is part of somebody training. It's part of karma, vipaka. It's part of the row we get to hoe in life. Mm-hmm. Includes our parents and includes our remarkable imperfection with our children. Because there is no way to raise a child that isn't deeply wounded, especially in a culture that's carrying out this crazy idea of the nuclear family. That for 99.96% of our time on the earth, we lived in small hunting and gathering bands. And in the last 5,000 years, we haven't. And we used to have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people who raised us. But now we have 2 or 1 or whatever. And it's just, it's that with which we have to work. So I'm saying this to comfort, if I can, anyone who's thinking, oh, I've been such a terrible parent. Or how can, I've got a small child, how can I do it perfectly? You can't.
Mm-hmm. So I appreciate your adding that, because it makes me think about something that I had not yet said and is important to say. It isn't the prevention of dysregulated states in an infant that is only going to create secure attachment. It is the repair of those broken attachments. It is the parent coming back and saying, oh, I get it, I missed it the first time, maybe even missed it the first 5 or 6 times, but you need your diapers changed. You need to go have a nap. That kind of repair gets more sophisticated as the child gets older and the parent gets to learn more about the child. And then pretty soon you're using words to say, oh, that must have hurt. Or you help the child put feelings, words, vocabulary to their experience. And all of a sudden they've got some ways to think about what's going on with them. You've given them some way to be a little more independent and to be a little more conscious of themselves. So that repair stuff, that's That's really important. And if you're in partnerships and in adults, hopefully you have discovered in your arguing with one another that repair is a pretty crucial part. That if you keep not addressing things, it's going to come back and bite you. So the task for the infant in the first maybe 18 months of life is to figure out the world. Is it a safe place to be, or is it something that I can't trust? And a lot of that has to do with the kind of attachment that's going on, the kind of ways that parents are attending to the child and saying, I am here for you time after time after time, or, you know what, I'm getting drunk tonight. You're on your own, kiddo. You know, you may be crying in your bed, but I'm too wiped out to go deal with you. A second developmental stage for kids is what somebody has called guilt versus autonomy. And the way that I think about this stage is that it comes after the child gets some mobility. They can start walking around, they get curious about their world, and that's a time when if a mom or a dad is going to be anxious about the child's independence, they are going to start reining the kid in. They're going to be hovering around, making sure that everything is okay. They're going to have a hard time when the child goes too far away, and they're not going to feel at ease again until the child is back next to them. And after a time, the toddler is going to start figuring out, oh, I can't be fully myself. I can't occupy my body, or I can't occupy my space because my parent stops being safe. They stop being easy to be around. Kids need to be able to go out and come back and touch base without feeling bad about it. I think about the adult version of this, and it is the stereotypic martyr who says to a child, oh, you go have fun. I'll be okay. Now, the parent could say the same thing in a different tone of voice. Hey, go have fun. I got things to do tonight. There is a lot more permission there for the child to go explore than in the first tone of voice, which says, you got to stick around and take care of me. Your autonomy is threatening to me. So some of why I'm talking about all of this is that these are vulnerable times in a child's life that can easily get dysregulated, that can easily get agitated and stirred up, and the child, not until they are much older, the child just doesn't have a way to understand this stuff. So all they've got is a feeling in their body. So I think I want to say some things about what healthy attachment, what secure attachment can do for kids and us as adults, because usually, I think the figure that I've read is that 85% of the time a child is going to have a similar attachment pattern as its parents, primary caretaker particularly. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you are condemned to that. That safe, secure attachment.
Never get what I want.
Well, slip me a note about it, and we'll see about that afterwards. When an infant can feel safe in its own body, there is going to be a relaxation. There's going to be a sense of safety. There's going to be decreased vigilance. I don't have to be so aware of where the threat is coming from, particularly abandonment or being stirred up. There's going to be increased vigor. The kid's going to have more energy because it's not battling its own body state so much. There is resilience that is getting built into this little one with a secure attachment, because what it's learning is, I can be frustrated, but that frustration state is solved relatively soon and without too much distress. And if parents are intuitive about this kind of stuff, they end up giving their children more frustration as it goes along. Instead of solving the problem, as the kids get older, they say, well, gee, I wonder how you're going to work that out. It's not like, oh, let me fix this toy for you. Let me show you how this goes. It's, gee, I wonder if you can figure this out. I'll stay by you and see what you come up with. So the more frustration that a child can have and tolerate, the better able they are going to be to know how to regulate themselves. They can begin to draw on their own resources that the parent has helped put into them. Another thing that's happening in these first couple of years of life is that there is an internalization of this atmosphere of, I am wanted, I am welcomed in this relationship, I am loved. That's a great package to carry around inside of you. It can get you through a lot of deprivation if you can access it and refer to it.
That's better than there's something fundamentally wrong with me and no one would love me no matter what I do.
Right. Yes, exactly. Particularly if they knew what was inside, they wouldn't
exactly.
love me. Yeah.
You're speaking of yourself, I guess.
Yes. No, right. I was speaking in the papal you.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. I think another thing that happens with secure attachment is that the child can afford to be curious about themselves, their body, their world. It's all okay to go out there and explore. They are going to get dinged up, but they're not going to get shamed for it. They're not going to get humiliated for it. It's going to be fixable. Scraped knees, even broken bones, they can be repaired. But if you say something about how stupid that was to do, or you're an idiot, those are wounds that are invisible but pretty powerful. Healthy attachment in adulthood, what does that look like? One of the things is that people aren't so preoccupied with getting their needs met because they've had them met enough. They know that they can live with delayed gratification. They know that there are some healthy ways to soothe themselves. They probably have a few unhealthy ways to soothe themselves. Dark chocolate, pizza, come to mind? There's another way, yes. It's possible when you have been given a lot of empathy to give empathy to others. Empathy is a byproduct of all those thousands of interactions of attachment and attunement. You've got room in your heart. You've got room in your body and your head to say, I can see you there. I get what's going on because I don't have to think about myself right now. If you can do that, then it's likely that you're going to be part of a social network. You're going to have friends. You may not have a family that you want to spend a lot of time with because maybe escaping from them is just what you needed to do in order to earn your more secure attachment. But you probably found a surrogate family along the way. You've got enough friends, or you've got quite literally another family, maybe in-laws, where you can say, I can be attached to these people. These people want me around and I like them.
One of the purposes for spiritual community.
Yes, exactly. Taking refuge in the Sangha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Here's where the clinging part comes in. If your internal states are intense if you don't know how to soothe yourself, if you haven't been soothed enough as a child, then it's going to be difficult to say, I can't. Let me say this more clearly. The more emotional storms that you have to contend with, the more difficult it is to be able to let go and say, things are going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. Because that's not been your experience. Your experience is that these intense emotional states come and they sweep me away. I can't think clearly. I can't stand it to be inside my own skin. I've got to get away. Secure attachment helps people prevent that kind of emotional intensity in the first place, but if it comes around, they can have a sense of, I've watched this come and go before. It doesn't have to freak me out so much. I've got a way to contend with this stuff. I can survive it. And the clinging has to do with when the storm is happening, you are saying to yourself, I can't survive this. This is too much. I have to hang on to something that is going to get me through this. I have to force an outcome. I have to have life be a certain kind of way. You can't talk to me about certain things right now because I'm going to be too upset. That's a kind of clinging in a relationship that says, I've got outcomes that have to happen here for me to be all right. I think one way to think about an ideal model of mental health is being able to live at a point of creative indifference. All of us have to have defenses in order to get through life. We have to be able to put things off. We have to be able to repress some things. We have to find other ways to distract ourselves to get through certain kinds of emotional difficult times. But if you got some flexibility, if you realize that you can survive emotional intensity, you can survive crying for an hour. Some people say, if I start crying, I'm never going to stop. I've got so much grief. Well, that's a fear, certainly. I can respect that. But when people discover, I started crying and there was somebody there to comfort me, or it only lasted for 20 minutes, or it only lasted for an hour, and I'm here, and I feel better. That gives you an option to go one way or another. I can cry or I can not cry. I can be angry or I don't have to be angry. Depends on what the situation is. And as long as I don't have to avoid those kinds of emotional states, I can be pretty balanced. I don't have to cling to particular things to make me feel okay. So a last part here. I think about this kind of secure attachment and how it impacts meditation. I think for most of us, in order to start meditation, you have to have an observation platform. You have to have some place to start from, to watch your breath, to pay attention to what's going on in your body. If there are dramatic stories that you are telling yourself, if you're preoccupied about your needs not getting met, if you're fighting with your partner, if your parent is sick, if your parent is crazy and intruding on your life, if you're unemployed and you're not sure where the rent is going to come from, those things are going to occupy your brain, and it's going to be really hard to just be present in your body. At the best of times, I think our brains are really busy. But if you've got a way to know that just like when you were an infant, you're going to have needs and desires that rise, they will be met. Or they won't be met and you'll survive. But the rising and falling of the stories that you tell yourself, the thoughts and the feelings that grab your attention, and you want to go down the rabbit hole with them because they're so doggone seductive, even though they're negative stories, even though you've been down that rabbit path hundreds, maybe thousands of times before. If you can watch and have a secure sense of self, you don't have to get caught up in that so much. You can say, oh yeah, I've been there before. I don't have to think that right this moment. I can say, thanks for sharing, but I've got something else that I want to pay attention to. I want to pay attention to my breathing. I want to be present. I don't want to be thinking about what kind of past I had or what kind of future I'm going to have. I guess I'm also thinking about a piece here of identity. If I'm going to imagine that I am going to be impermanent, if I'm going to think about my own death, and most of my life I have been searching for connection and attachment, I've been living with the pain of impermanence for a long, long time.
Forever.
Forever, exactly. And so contemplating impermanence, my own particularly, it's not going to be so easy. But knowing that I am okay, even if I am in distress, this is going to pass, I think the impermanence part is a lot easier to begin to take in. I'm also thinking about the notion of this droplet, this small I, joining the larger universe. If I don't have a secure sense that I am enough, the idea of losing every part of my boundary, that's a pretty threatening, terrifying kind of picture to have. So I think you have to have a secure platform to watch this from in order to begin to relax and say, this is okay to let go of. It occurs to me that I want to say some things about how to manage if you happen to be not in the 55% of the people in our population who are securely attached. What happens if you had an anxious or an avoidant kind of attachment? It is possible to earn secure attachment. It's going to take work. I think particularly it is going to take courage. I think that's one of the hallmarks of mental health, is a willingness to experience what you believe is terrifying and is going to sweep you over. You're not going to do this in one big chunk. You're going to have to do it in small chunks so that you can be at ease enough with it to know that you can get through it. But facing the intense affect, knowing that you can contain it, knowing somebody else can contain it, it's important. I had somebody come to me about a year ago, and she said, I'm feeling terribly alone and lost. A relationship has just broken up, and I've been to 2 therapists, and I don't want to see either of them again. The first therapist, when I told them my story, she cried. The second therapist said to me, I want to give you a hug at the end of the session. And she was astute enough for herself to know this person can't contain my story. What she appreciated about me was that I didn't try and take care of her. She needed to be independent, and she needed me to be able not to get freaked out by her story and try and help her feel better. Yes.
Bridge.
Yes.
Bridge. As in my model, the Western models, including medication, science, come all the way up to high-functioning, garden variety neurotic.
Mm-hmm.
And then spiritual practices go from there.
Right.
Most, thinking of Buddhism, Buddhism starts somewhere here with a fairly well-functioning self, all the way to completely opening. One of the ways that meditation is useful in this learning to self-soothe is that we learn how to sit, for instance, and to sit here despite the fact that I don't want to sit here. or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling hopeless, or the abyss has opened, or I'm so excited I can't, or I'm sick and I can't bear these feelings. And what we learn to do in meditation is to bear the unbearable. And so instead of always moving toward distraction, we actually learn to self-soothe. Yes. And we do that thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of times so that we actually learn to stay present. Stephen Levine just a bunch of them. We learn to stay present in hell. And so we can observe rage. There was a time I was practicing in India, and there was a well, and it was about 100 feet from my little stone hut, and it was a pilgrimage place, and people were using the well, and there was a chain on the bucket. And for 3 or 4 weeks, I hardly noticed. But one day, all of a sudden, it bothered me. And there I was sitting in meditation in my monk outfit, and all of a sudden I started getting so filled with hatred. I hated those people. And my temperature spiked, and I had images of attacking them with an assault rifle or with a machete and throwing them in the well, and this whole thing exploded in my consciousness. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there, and when it took about half an hour or an hour or so, and then it went past, and my entire mattress was soaked from the sweat of it. But I was deeply into retreat, and at that point I'd been practicing for maybe 20 years, maybe less than that, doesn't matter. But I was able to bear that incredible storm, which is part of the human structure. Mm-hmm. And after that, I was much less frightened of rage. When other people would get rageful, I'd realize, right, I know that. That's not an alien phenomenon, that's in here. So learning to bear the unbearable is part of learning to self-soothe.
Yes.
And the role of the healer or the other or the therapist, as you described so beautifully, often is to be present with someone as they enter terrain they've never been able to enter, and provide a secure holding environment to provide a safety. So it really is okay to go there. I mean, the countless times in my work, countless. I've been sitting with someone, and a feeling of some kind will emerge that is new or unknown. It's like, what's that? And oh, I'm so sorry, I'm having this feeling. And my task is to say, well, actually, maybe that's why you're here. And maybe that's a part of you, child, mm-hmm. that's never felt safe enough to be seen before. And maybe your job is to really turn toward this part of yourself and love it. Mm-hmm. And then people do, and something comes up, either mild, or sometimes it gets big, and sometimes there's thoughts, and sometimes there's memories, and then the storm passes through, and then what there is love and acceptance. Mm-hmm. And it's very natural that, just like if we fall and we scrape our arm, the body knows perfectly well how to heal that. The same is true with the psyche. If we just provide a safe environment for it, it loves to heal. It's so longing to heal and to awaken. That awakening isn't something we make happen. It's who we are. It's who we already are. And it's all about relaxing into and allowing, rather than this tight. And it's one of the boundaries between psychological and spiritual process.
I like your emphasis about the numbers of times that we have to travel the same territory. A colleague of mine really early in my career said, I think that all of us have about 4 or 5 sentences that we have to work 20 to 30,000 times apiece.
You mean like you're not worth loving?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Or I don't deserve to be here.
Yeah.
Yes. If they found out about me, I'd
Right.
be discovered as an imposter.
I pose as a Dharma teacher.
Oh, right. Shoot. Okay. So one of the places that I go with what you're talking about, Robert, is that most of us tend to repeat what we are familiar with. Mm-hmm. So if we had a parent who was anxiously attached to us or avoidantly attached, we're likely going to pick partners and friends in our life to do the very same thing with. Mm-hmm. We're just going to keep going through it. And so one of your tasks is to figure that pattern out, and if you can, hang out with different people. You know, stop being around people who you are continually in pursuit of, always wondering, are they going to be here or are they not? You know, am I going to feel good or am I going to feel awful? That could take years to go through because you have to build alternate support systems in your life if you're going to really say, well, I'm thinking about an alcoholic, for instance. I mean, how many years would a person be a practicing alcoholic and have friendships that are around that particular activity and then say, you know, I'm not going to hang around those people anymore. I mean, that's a big hole. There's a lot of structure in one's life that you spend developing those relationships. And how do you replace that? 90 meetings in 90 days is one way to do that. But you know, if you've got somebody living in your house or you've got somebody in your family who is wanting to suck you back in to that addiction again, it's tough to set boundaries. I also like it that you talked about the therapist, the teacher, because I think in order to repair faulty attachments, you have to be around somebody who is going to see you, somebody who's going to value your strengths and be able to help manage your vulnerabilities without too much intrusion. Sometimes some advice is a good thing to get, but if the person is saying, well, let me tell you how I think you ought to do it, maybe not so much. I think, go ahead.
One of my Sufi teachers put it really beautifully. It said, seek those who see you in your full potential, not in your shrunken self.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not that they just see who you are, rather than the adaptations that we took on as small children.
Mm-hmm. So in some ways, there is a lot of parallel between a teacher, a mentor, a good friend, a loving friend, a therapist. There is reparenting that happens there. And you wouldn't necessarily call it that, but that's some of the stuff that's happening, is that the things that you missed out on early, you get to go back and try it again. And this is where some of the active courage comes in, because there are going to be times when you want to absolutely merge with that person, or you want to run like hell the other way. You're absolutely certain that they are pissed off with you and they are not going to want you around in their life ever again. Do you have the courage to stay around in yourself and with them and check it out and say, so is that really how you feel about me or not? Mm-hmm. Another couple of things that I think about is that for a lot of people who had a lot of drama and intensity early in their life, there is the wrong kind of touching that you got. There is an absence of touching. And traumatic memories are stored in our bodies. And so having body work, getting massages, getting other kinds of deep tissue kind of work, that's pretty important. Tai Chi, Qigong, all of those kinds of movement, even going to the gym and exercising, stretching muscles. I should have said yoga in there a moment ago, but that can release an awful lot of tension. It can reawaken body memories that you have not really ever remembered. And once you can connect body and affect and memory, then you got some way to understand and contain what it is that you're experiencing. I think developing a story about where you come from is pretty important. That's another way to do some healing. And it's not likely going to be an accurate story, but if it's a story that makes sense to you, that's kind of important. So for instance, if you have a sense of aloneness, that there is nobody in the world who really gets you, and you feel that in your gut, and you feel it in different places of tension in your life, if you know that that's not only you, but you're experiencing the emotional state of one of your parents, that it has an origin that didn't start with you. That's an important way to begin to put some distance between that intense emotional storm and where you are right now. Because you can say, you know, this is not only me. I have other parts of myself. This belongs to somebody else. They gave it to me. But, yeah.
Pause
yes,
for a
let's
sec.
do that.
Ideas, thoughts, thinking. Let's take a couple of... in honor of Ruth Denison, the great mistress of movement meditation, I invite you to follow me. Just do what I'm doing. And be in the body. Let's let a big sigh out on the way down.
Yes.
Again. All right. Can we go in a different direction?
I'm
for a
done.
bit? You're done?
Really, yeah, your timing was impeccable.
All right. There's a Mary Oliver poem. The last few lines are very relevant. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To hold it against your bones, knowing that your life depends upon it. That's not it. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. Aha. To love what is mortal. To dare to attach.
Yes.
To dare to enter a relationship deeply and vulnerably. To love what is mortal. To hold it against your bones, knowing that your own life depends on it. And when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing that your own life depends upon it. And when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Every relationship ends in separation or death. Every relationship ends in separation or death. We joke sometimes, we better get together soon before one of us dies. Because one of us will die. Both of us will, but one of us will likely die before the other. We have a...
You have to go first.
I get to go first? Oh, okay. We had a very good mutual friend, Bob Bagwell.
Yeah.
Who, what's that? Who just had a heart attack one day and died 10 years ago or so. But gone. So the question is, in a way, dare we really connect? Dare we really love each other? And one of the ways that I believe Buddhist teachings are profoundly misunderstood is they say, don't attach. And one meets a lot of Buddhists who are very tense, trying to not exist. Right? There's some traditions where be careful, don't make karma, don't make sankharas, don't engage, because only through not engaging can you be free. Well, it's a huge self. It's a selfish structure that's saying don't engage. And it leads to isolation and loneliness. And it's a way of, one meets, there's a term, I guess it's not a respectful term, but it's descriptive. One meets in the Vipassana world some people who are Vipassanoid. It's like paranoid and schizoid. Vipassanoid is, breathing, walking. I am not going to be spontaneous, because to be spontaneous would mean to be alive, and to be alive would be to
feel things.
To feel things.
Yes.
And so, no, thank you very much. I am going to get concentrated. Who watch? I'm going to be so concentrated, my mind will never wander. If I have one teaching, I come back to this again and again. Please give up the notion that to be a good meditator or a skillful meditator means to have a concentrated mind. Right? Almost everyone believes that, because in those moments when the mind gets calm and tranquil and concentrated, it feels so nice. But then when life is happening and there's disruption, I can't meditate because my mind's too restless. What? Or I can't meditate because I'm angry. What? That's when we need to meditate. Because meditation is truly about learning to accept things as they are, to see the universe as it is. And this, and this, and this is the universe. This is the galaxy. This is the earth. We are that which we're seeking. And we don't have to go anywhere. What we have to do is perceive it differently. Imagine, and you've done such a great job of describing, learning to have a healthy self. It's part of the task. But then there's another piece of it, it's a paradoxical part, which is to recognize this isn't who I am. Mm-hmm. And the Buddha, bless his heart, yay, Buddha. What a brilliant, I really believe that the Buddha's discovery was the most important discovery ever on the earth. He's not the only one who discovered it, but that it's possible to remember what we really are. So, with this healthy self, or along with the development of the healthy self, what's the time? Okay. The Eightfold Path, this exquisite model. The first step, check out your worldview. Does your worldview fit the world? Are you really going to get happy through capitalist, consumerist materialism? Does it really lead to happiness? What would lead to happiness? Well, the Buddha said, look carefully and see if you can find anything that lasts, anything that really satisfies, and most beautifully, can you find a self? Now, can you find a self that endures? Where is it? Then there's the second step of the Eightfold Path, which is if this is your aspiration to become wise like this, how might you think? What would you aspire to? And that is aspiration might be, I'd like to be generous, wise, compassionate, and maybe I'd like to even practice some renunciation, not going after everything I want all the time. And then speech, action, livelihood. How shall I live in the world? How shall I take this beautiful self that I'm developing, and how shall I have it relate to others? And then effort, skillful effort, observing our mental states and shaping them, and then developing mindfulness and concentration. And then, so we have this hypothesis. The hypothesis is, I bow to Matt Flickstein, my teacher of some years. Everything that arises disappears, whatever is born dies. Nothing escapes the cycle of birth and death. It is important for us to directly and experientially realize that there is never a point in time when something exists and is not in the process of becoming something other than it was just a moment before. Get this. All suffering comes from, he says, attachment, but I would say clinging or ignorance, trying to hold on to that which is perpetually changing, and all ignorance, all clinging comes from delusion. We need to live in the clarity and space of non-clinging, neither grasping nor pushing anything away. The key is just to be present with what arises from moment to moment, with neither holding or resisting. And this is important. At the same time, it's essential not to fall into the trap of denying the relative existence of our psychophysical organism and the world of experience it presents. Very often, one hears, there's a tone, and often it's said in Buddhism, you got to get rid of yourself, right? The Anatta teaching, not self, get rid of it. Well, this is real. It's as temporary as a mayfly, but it's real. And it also is the vehicle. The Buddha said that the human birth is the optimal birth because we're conscious enough and we hurt enough. And so with this capacity of having a self, having a sense, a locus to work from, a vehicle, not only a physical vehicle, but a stable enough sense of I am, then we undertake the task of systematically examining what it is to be a human being. This is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And we study the 4 foundations of mindfulness experientially and observationally for one reason, or for a bunch of reasons, but one kind of surprising one. We study the body to discover it's completely porous. All it is a mass of sensations, and it's constantly changing. And then we examine the feelings, the pleasant, unpleasant, and indeterminate things that happen at the sense doors, and they're impersonal too. And then we study all the mental patterns, the story. I love that piece you said about that was new for me. It's very useful to have a story, like my story of how I came to have the wound that I have with my mother and so on, and the alcoholism in the family. And it's really great to have that story. And then at a certain point, it's really great to realize that's a fantasy. It only exists in the mind. All that exists is this present moment, and I don't even have a past. Right? The past is a set of ideas. It's a set of thoughts happening now. And so if I can just land now, then so what if my life circumstances were not very good in my childhood? It's over. It's utterly over. And if I can be aware of the patterns, which then when that pattern arises, it's like, oh, there's that. It's still painful, but thank you for sharing. I don't have to behave on the basis of that pattern. I can do something completely new given the context I'm in. So one of the purposes of meditation is to become really attuned to that which we take to be I. And then something utterly mysterious happens, which is that we realize that the whole thing is happening in our mind, or in the mind. And that's freedom. And another, a different came in from over here. Story from the Tibetan tradition. Marpa, one of the great founding people of Tibetan Buddhism. He was a householder and he had several children, and one of his children died. And he was weeping and wailing over the death of his child. And one of his students came and said, "Master, why are you making such a big deal? You teach us that this is all an illusion." And his response through his tears was, "Of course it's an illusion. And the death of one's child is the most painful illusion." So it's this astounding paradox. I don't know if I can I go back? Oh, look at that. I'm impressed. That's a self-portrait. Actually, it's a tiny piece of who we are. It's a minuscule piece of who we are. And yet, we took on this birth and then went through somebody training, and then we suffer to the degree that we forget our true nature. And we are so fortunate to live in the West and have these psychological, emotional understandings. Just remembered one of my teachers, a man named Munindra, incredible Dharma teacher. It was before I'd done any therapy, and I was in Bodh Gaya in India practicing, and I was so freaked out, right? Crying and freaking out, and then very calm, and it was wild. And I would go to him totally disheveled, and he would say, "Oh, take lightly, Robert. Take lightly. Take lightly? Jeez." Also, my first wife and I went to her teacher one time. We were a year or two married, and we were fighting a lot. And we went to her teacher and said, "What can we do?" And she said, "Oh, you know the Dharma. Stop fighting."
Easy for her to say.
Easy for her. Well, she was celibate.
Yeah.
She had not, and she understood the Dharma, and I think she really understood the path to freedom.
Yeah.
But we had another dilemma to deal with, which is that we were being parents. We weren't parents yet. We were trying to be intimate. We were trying to connect through our incredible wounds. Yeah, skip this. So what do you think, Larry? How are we doing? We've got about 15 minutes.
I think I would like to have... They have been listening quite patiently
They
to
have.
us.
Should we give them a chance to talk?
Yes. That's what I'd like to do.
Is there a microphone? Oh, I see. Thank you.
That's not a flashlight?
Test 1, 2, 1, 2. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there we go. So, would anyone like to comment? completely overwhelmed them.
I thought they were asleep.
Hello? Okay. Hello?
Yeah, you got
Good.
it.
All right. About the time that I started trying to meditate on my own, I was a bit concerned about the Buddhist methodology and thought. And one of those things, the criticisms that's waged against the Buddhist methodology is this idea that this whole thing about non-attachment, right? And that part of that sits at it's part of what they think that leads to nihilism, right? That it's all bleak, all for nothing, rather melancholy. And I just so happened to be listening to an interview with a man, a Dharma teacher from the UK. It was an online interview, and he and the context and the revolutionary tone of which he presented his teaching. And so he context has started talking about the teaching around non-attachment. And I think his name is John Peacock, or Robert Peacock, I can't remember. He corrected him, says, well, he wasn't really trying to teach non-attachment, he was trying to teach correct engagement. And when I heard that, that said, okay, maybe we're onto something here. And that was what started me to open myself up to the ideas and come here and start to learn more and listen. And I was wondering if that kind of sentiment resonates with you, Robert. And so in reference to what you're talking about, attachment, the healthy attachment versus an unhealthy attachment. And just to give an example, let's say a relationship, two adults trying to get together, and this, you're hashing out all of this stuff, like you said, the old wounds are coming out, and the ways in which you're trying to bond with that person, some good, some bad. What are the healthy ways of attachment? What are the ways to create that bond? Healthy bond, and also with the child, and say you have all of this this stuff that you have to work with, these contexts of who you are, these attachment issues that you've developed over time, and now you're presented with this child. What's the engagement methodology going forward?
So is it okay if I start? I think it's important to have a way to observe the style of engagement that you have, and to know that that the story you're creating about that engagement is only partially true. You're only having 50% of it. Let me give an example. Oftentimes it is a dynamic I hear with couples. One person is in pursuit. Let's talk. I think there probably isn't a much more terrifying phrase that a woman can say to her husband than, honey, we have to talk. And us guys, we don't have a lot of training in that kind of stuff. We are out of our league. If it's a game, we've lost before we even start because we don't know the rules. So typically it is the guy who is backing up, and the woman is saying, but we have to talk about this, and the conversation doesn't happen, or it's a fight. Oftentimes the woman, because she is feeling deprived of something really important to her, begins to say to herself, you're doing this to punish me. Well, as soon as that story enters the picture, the brain, there are all kinds of consequences with that conclusion. If the other side of the story can be told, which is this guy is just in retreat because he doesn't know how to think about what's going on. He's overwhelmed with his own feelings. He's afraid he's going to be angry and he's going to say stuff that's going to hurt her feelings. And he's in retreat until he can somehow calm down, distract himself, and be calmer. He's doing this for survival, not to punish her. all of a sudden there's a different language that can happen between these two people. They can have more engagement. But you have to be able to step back enough to watch the pattern. There's a lot more stuff in there too, but that's at least a start.
We have about 5 minutes.
Okay?
Time passes quickly.
Yes, it does. So are you saying that I should keep my responses shorter?
No, no.
Okay.
No, honey, your response was just the right length.
Oh, thank goodness.
I wasn't criticizing you this time.
I know I'll hear about it later.
I was actually just thinking more, how do we end this lovely time together?
Ah,
I don't think there's time to do what we talked about.
right, right.
Unless maybe a piece of it, which would be yeah, without even changing position, please drop into your body and feel your body. Get ready to meditate. Prepare for liftoff. 3, 2, 1, meditate. To the stars, no. Now, we could take a long time to do this next thing, but we could also just drop into the beauty and love of your life in this moment. You're alive and you're breathing, you're safe. You have enough to eat. And there's some longing that you have. And one of the longings is probably there are words that you've longed to hear your whole life. And one visualization we can do is to imagine there's a golden Buddha sitting in your heart that's shaped exactly like you. Exactly. Every hair, every follicle. And that this is a symbolic representation of the entire universe. It's the essence of love. And are there words you've always longed to hear? Words like, I love you. You don't have to do anything to be lovable. Or, I'll never leave you. I'll never abandon you. You're already enough. Or maybe it's, I'm really sorry I blew it so badly. Despite how I behaved, I always loved having you in my life. And let your own intuition be open. And if this runs up against obstacles like, oh, this is silly, or, oh, I can't say that to myself, or that's wrong, then that's really useful information. And there's a very beautiful and simple prayer of a sort. The words go like this: I love you, with your name at the end. And if you had a diminutive name when you were a child, try that out. I love you, with your name at the end. And there are two phrases that I have lived with for now more than a decade, with which I begin every time when I do any kind of formal practice. They go like this: I aspire to love and accept myself exactly as I am in this moment. And whenever I'm hurting, no matter how I'm hurting, I aspire to hold myself in sweet compassion. This golden Buddha in our hearts, and it could be a Jesus or a Mary or a Kuan Yin or whoever you'd like it to be, the chosen ideal. These archetypes, these structures are so deep in the human psyche that they can't be messed with by a bad childhood, a difficult childhood. So in a way, what we're doing is we're learning to turn on that which predates even our birth. And then expanding the frame just a little more. Remember the look of the earth from space. This is you. This is your greater body. And let yourself just relax and realize this is you. From the Zen world, this is your face before you were born, or this is the direction. And then expanding just a bit more into being the galaxy. How beautiful you are. And further and further into the infinite vastness of love, where all the galaxies abide, and where that which was here before the galaxies emerged. I love you with your own name, and opening deeper and deeper. And no matter what arises, whatever thought arises, whatever memory arises, whatever mood arises, it's all part of you. And none of it needs to be resisted. None of it needs to be feared. And so one way to think of meditation and spiritual practice is it's just remembering to remember that there's nothing to reject. There's nothing to fear. There's just this. There's just this human body sitting here for a moment, alive and awake, and infinitely capable of loving. And if you feel comfortable enough, and you don't have to do this, but if you feel comfortable enough, take a moment to just reach out and touch a hand near your own and make contact. It's so wonderful that we take on these human bodies, because then we get to be God in drag, meeting each other. And I want to offer this little poem from Hafiz to my friend Larry. I knew we would be friends. As soon as you opened your mouth and I heard those soft sounds, I knew we would be friends. The first time, dear pilgrim, I heard you laugh, I knew it would not take me long to turn you back into God. So, any last word?
No. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being present as long as you were able to be.
Yeah, thank you. This is a long dreamed of moment, and thank you so much for doing this with me.
I loved it. I love you.
I love you too. It's really quite a privilege. So, my dear friends, we bow to that within us which is the one. Well, a gong, an official ending. Here it is. You do it. Round one is over. We have a 10-minute break and then we're meditating all night. And thank you for joining us on the internet, my friends.